Alright, what's going on, guys? Okay, so this is kind of like a part 2 to that stance, what's your stance rant I did a week ago or so. So, what I wanted to talk about a little bit more is that bladed stance and why it's so tricky, okay? So in the last video I kind of talked about that foot position. A lot of times when you have someone in the bladed stance, especially if they're super bladed, right? Like a Philly shell position is pretty bladed, right? It's probably not completely bladed. You probably won't see that too much, but it's pretty bladed. It has to be in order for it to work, okay? Because it's hiding your setter line a little bit more. You got the head movement more like this dipping motion. You got your lead shoulder, lead arm protects your stomach. And this lead hand can be here, here. It can cover your chin, basically taking away any setter line shots, basically. Okay? So it's so tricky because you have to set things up to land shots on this stance, okay? So what happens is sometimes when someone is standing pretty bladed like that, usually in the beginning of the fight, it seems, or in lulls in the action, if the other person is smart, they can put you in a foot position where you are basically left to just using your lead hand. If you try to rush in, he's going to counter you because he knows that you can't really land a right hand. You have to either feint or use your jab to get him out of position, or you're left to, basically rushing in, which is what he wants you to do. So what you want to do is not play that game, okay? You want to control yourself in the fight. You control when you fight. Sometimes you make him miss just to make him miss to get tired, okay? Especially in the early rounds. You want to feint, use your defense head movement, get him to throw, and maybe not be there to counter, right? You want to sometimes just get out of the way completely. You don't always want to just stay in range and try to counter everything he throws. Then you're going to tire yourself out, because then you're fighting, you got to fight offensively, and then you're trying to fight offensively again. Every time he tries to be offensive, it's like you're doubling the amount of times you're fighting, okay? So you got to pace yourself. You got to find your pace that's comfortable for you and that you like. Okay, so that takes time. And it also takes patience, okay? So back to this foot position. So if this dog toy is representing his lead foot, and let's say he's standing pretty bladed, and I'm going to stand pretty bladed as well, when we get in this kind of lined up foot position where we're not really on line, on track to run our offense, our full offense, okay? Typically, your lead foot is pointing at his center line in between his feet. His is doing the same to yours. That's when you're on track. As I think Freddie Roach called it, being on track. Okay? So your center lines are, they're almost lined up. It takes a little step, a little movement to get into the zone where you can guys both start, throwing. You're in the pocket, basically. And that's one thing that kind of sets boxing apart from some of these other arts is a lot of the other martial arts, you're either out or in, right? You're either completely out of range, or you're so close that you're clinching, and in the pocket is very dangerous because he can land on you, you can land on him. That's where you got to have skills, right? That's where boxing skill comes into play. Because boxing, the range is a lot closer. We're right outside that pocket. We don't have to worry about takedowns and kicks and all that. So they're right outside the pocket, basically. A little bit of movement from me or a little bit of movement from him, and we are in that throwing range, okay? And of course, we fight at long range and we fight super up close too. But, this range particularly is something that you see mostly in boxing. You see it in Glory K1 style kickboxing as well, because you know we don't really have to worry as much about elbows and throws. I mean, they have some of that in kickboxing. It depends on the rule set, but you get the picture, okay? But that's where boxing kind of specializes, in that pocket range, okay? So what happens is sometimes these bladed fighters, guys who use the bladed stance really well, will know how to put you in this position where your lead foot, our center lines are not exposed to each other, right? So if you're not used to this position, you might get frustrated and just try to lunge in, and that's probably what he's expecting you to do, okay? And he's just going to try to pick you off. He might dip or go back and just counter you, okay? But what you can do, you know, one thing you can do is just pull back and reset, right? Talked about that in the last video. Every time you notice that he's got you in this position, pull back, reset. He'll have to adjust. And, you know, maybe he'll get the picture, or maybe eventually you guys will start settling down into a more lined up position. Another thing talked about in the last video you can do. You can do this kind of cross step. It's risky, right? I didn't really mention how risky it is in the last video. It can be done. You have to do it with purpose, and you can't do it every time. That's going to be predictable. You got to be unpredictable, all right? But boxing is, it's the sweet science. It's not rocket science, okay? It's more cooking than baking. You can't use the same formula every single time. You have to, you know, depending on that situation, you might have to add more pepper or less spices, whatever. You know, it's more cooking than baking, where everything's the same every time. It just doesn't work that way, okay? So that kind of cross step, if you can feign him, get some kind of distraction, you take a tiny step outside to his blind side to pivot, and you can catch him like that. He's most likely going to, you know, he's going to do something to protect himself, but you could probably catch him a couple times with that. Another thing you can do, same situation, but I'm going to do a more traditional kind of slip to the blind side. I step my right foot, boom, and then I can charge forward, and same thing, try to catch him before he readjusts, okay? So another thing you can do is, now we're talking about moving to this side, moving in, okay? So going to the blind side can frustrate him, because he's putting you in a position where you have to work more to set up your shots. So, and you know, that's one of the drawbacks of a bladed stance is, yeah, your center line's less exposed, but you're giving him basically a blind side, more of your blind side, okay? So what else you can do? Try moving this way. If you just get frustrated and lunge in, he's probably gonna counter you, because that's probably what he's expecting you to do. So you got to get close, feign your way in close, boom, boom, and try to set up your shots. So what's the difference? If you lunge in like this, you see traditionally how, if you lunge in like that, think about how you're kind of taught to step in boxing. A lot of times they're taught in the beginning to push off and bring your other foot, right? And they teach you these push off, like this, okay? But in reality, that wastes a lot of energy. You gotta push, and look at how long I'm basically not able to protect myself, right? That's like a half second in boxing. That's forever, all right? And it's predictable. I gotta get set before I can punch. So what you see in reality is it's more of either a shuffle kind of step, or it's this, I don't bring my lead foot. I get closer. As I get closer, I kind of inch my lead foot up. When it's time to attack, I drop, I shift my weight, and I keep my lead foot back so I can get out of range quickly, right? If I don't do that, I gotta push off, get in, I got to push off again. That's a lot of energy, right? That's going to add up. So what you see is this. You inch closer and closer, and then when you see an opening, boom, boom, and then you pull back out, and you can do it in kind of a shuffle motion, okay? You're inching in closer, closer. So I'm using weight shifts, slight little weight shifts for my steps. Now this is just like walking normally. That's what normally, when you walk around, that's what you're doing. You shift your weight. It's like a controlled fall. I've heard it called a controlled fall, okay? So you shift your weight and you catch yourself with your foot, right? So for me, I like to keep things as kind of natural as possible. So that's naturally how I walk. That's naturally how I think of my footwork, okay? I do a slight weight shift, and then when I reset my weight more to the middle, my foot kind of moves automatically in these little shuffle steps, okay? Does that make sense, hopefully? So to me, I like that better than the push, push kind of thing. Push, push, right? Well, some of the positives of this kind of step is I can make more adjustments mid-step. I got more control, more head movement, right? I'm more on balance. You can test to see if you're on balance. You have someone blow a whistle or clap while you're shadow boxing, and you should be able to stop at any point and freeze, all right? Okay? So I seen that from, that was a Marvin Cook drill. He talked about that. Test your balance. You have someone blow a whistle or clap, or, you know, you say stop, and at any point of your shadow boxing, you should be able to freeze. If you're doing these push-off steps where you're literally pushing, like, see, I can't stop in the middle of that. If I'm stepping with these little weight shifts, I can kind of control a little bit more of when I stop in the middle of them, okay? So, you know, when someone has a bladed stance like that, and you have to set things up more to land shots on them, that's why when you see two guys with a bladed stance, when both fighters have a bladed stance, it's more of a chess match, and you know, casual fans might find that a little more boring. But a lot of it is because there's going to be a lot more of this position where all you really have is a jab, and someone's going to have to set something up. Boom, boom. Poof, poof, poof. Right? It's going to take more to set things up, okay? Another thing I talked about in the last video, one of my coaches told me, your slips only work if you're in position to kick the other guy in the balls, okay? Not that you would, but what he was saying is, like I said earlier, when your lead feet is lined up with his center line, basically in between his legs, and his is with yours, you're basically right in the pocket. That's when your slips and stuff are going to be more effective. If we're both bladed in this bad position, not bad position, but in this tricky position, you know, I can slip this way, I can dip down here, I can, you know, pull over here. But if I go forward like this, I'm giving him my head. And because I'm on bladed feet, I don't really have a lot of good balance from this position. He could hit me with a hook and I'm going to go over. Like, I can feel I don't have balance here, okay? So in this bladed position here, your head movement is going to be more this way, down, dip, pull over to the blind side, okay? Does that make sense, hopefully? But when we are in this, when we are in the pocket here, you know, it's basically a little step over and we are in range to throw all of our offense use our head movement and all that. You can see from this pocket position, it just takes a half little step and we're basically completely squared up. So, which is why one of the reasons I always talk about training from this position, right? Getting your coordination and balance completely squared up, right? Trust me, try it out, you're gonna notice. You're gonna feel more balanced in your regular stance, even if you do stand bladed. Your punches, your defense, your head movement, everything's gonna feel more comfortable because it's a more natural position. It's more symmetrical, and your hands and feet get tied together a little bit more, right? The kinetic chain is a little more reinforced. And then you'll notice when you start moving around, not only do you feel more comfortable, but you get kind of naturally into the balanced kind of fighting stance, and you don't really have to worry about like following some specific formula on where to put your feet. You know, everybody's different. Everybody's going to have a little bit of different, a different style, a different way of standing, right? So, training from this completely squared up position, right? You'll see guys do drills like that. You'll see, you know, Lomachenko and a lot of Russian guys do drills where they're just basically completely squared up. And they're throwing and defending from this position, hitting the pads, you know, hitting the mitts. So, start training that. It's all about balance and coordination, really. I mean, to me, balance and coordination, rhythm, these are the things that are way more important than, you know, standing a certain way because someone told you to stand that way and just sticking with it forever even though it's uncomfortable and deep down you know that it's holding you back, okay? So you get what I see, I call it trainer stance. You see these brand new people and they get this weird kind of, they're two-bladed, they got their arm uncomfortably over here, right? And they get this weird kind of stance like this where like everything's out of a line, right? Think about structure. You want to have a natural structure. A lot of stuff I talk about is using your structure, right? And that comes from your balance, having good balance. A lot of this is due to, you know, having good balance, good structure. If you have a weird structure like that, you know, or another thing you see with the trainer stance is they stand really bladed, but then they turn their whole upper body because this is more comfortable to be facing forward like this than to be sideways. Like in Joe Frazier's book, he said, how am I supposed to fight anybody if I'm standing sideways to them, okay? But these are just personal preferences. If that's what you like, you know, stick with it. But I'm just letting you know, like, it's okay to find a comfortable stance for you, okay? Especially if you're a beginner. These completely squared up shadow boxing exercises, right? They reinforce all this weight shift that people have especially beginners have a hard time getting this weight shift, right? See even mid-level pretty good fighters that they still don't do this weight shift, right? Their head stays right in the center when they're throwing their offense. Boom, boom, boom. They do their pivots and stuff, but their head pretty much stays still. But you use the weight shift for your steps. You use it to add power to punches, for your head movement, right? And it's just more comfortable. You save energy. That's just my preferred way of stepping, okay? So like the last video I talked about, I like a semi-square stance most of the time. Sometimes it depends on, you know, it always depends, right? It's situational. If I'm fighting somebody who I think I can stay on the outside and keep them away, right? So I might do this for the first couple rounds, right? I might fight more bladed, right? But I might do this to keep him on the outside and just kind of read him for a little bit. I'll purposely try to put him in that bad foot position to see what he does, right? To see so I can study him, right? In the first video I talked about how Joe Louis was watching some Joe Louis, and I noticed the first few rounds, they kept going in that position. And then as the fight went on, they got more in the pocket, lined up. Because I was thinking, well, he probably did that on purpose to read his opponent, okay? But yeah, typically, I like to fight semi-square, right? I'm a little bit in the middle. And from this position, I can fight on the front foot, right? The front axis. You watch some Wilson Caden. He's one of the best boxing YouTube channels I've ever. And he doesn't get any credit. And I don't know what happened to him. He stopped uploading probably like 10 years ago. But this is one of the most informational channels on YouTube. So check it out. I'll put the link in the description. Right? And he talks about distance deception, right? And that is fighting from 3 different axes, 3 different planes. Straight up and down, weight evenly distributed, right? Your head stays right in the middle. It's an easy target. But what you can do is you can dip straight down like this, right? Now the front axis, it squares you up more, but it gives you both hands. It gives you a full range of head movement. Boom, boom. And then you can pull back. You can dip, you can pull back, roll to a back axis, right? Without really changing my feet, I lean backwards. I appear more bladed. It's a trickier stance. It's more, you can pressure forward with it, right? But it's great for countering. I got great backward mobility. I'm already leaning backward. So I can constantly set traps, boom, boom, move back, counter. I got the shoulder roll. My head movement here is going to be like this. Dip like this. Dip like that. Okay? But I can move between the 2 axes. Back, forward. Back foot, front foot. Okay? So that's why I like the stance. I feel like I got the best of both, right? I can move between the 2, right? So what you see, a big problem, what I call the trainer stance, is they don't teach, a lot of people don't teach this axis kind of concept. They teach you just kind of stand super bladed, but you're turning your body uncomfortably to still be facing forward, but your feet are super bladed, and there's not a lot of you don't get this kind of head movement. They'll tell you to move your head, but then they have you do it like this. You're basically just putting yourself more and more into the line of fire, and you got bad balance, right? So you stand a little bit semi-square, you get a full range of head movement. See, what happens is all this stuff gets mixed up. Right? There's different tactics you can use with different stances, right? If I'm standing more squared up, I'm probably pressuring forward, cutting off the ring, right? There's a reason why I'm standing like this, right? If I'm standing more bladed on the back foot, I'm doing it for a reason, okay? So understand these positions and you understand the reasons behind them, okay? And you can flow between them. That's what you want to do. You want to be a complete fighter. You don't want to be one-dimensional. So many guys, even good top-level world champions, but they're one-dimensional, okay? So you can learn to fight from both positions. Back foot, front foot, and mix them together, and you'll be a more versatile fighter. Okay, that was the whole kind of concept when I first started training. I play drums, so everything we do in drumming is you practice left just as much as your right. Okay, so I had that same concept when I first started training. Okay, so that's a lot of why I would do this squared up, completely squared up training. Bop, bop. I've seen people doing it in Russia. At first I just started doing it because it felt natural, right? Then I started seeing trainers in Russia using it with their students, and I thought, okay, I must be on the right track here. And it feels more comfortable to learn things from this position, okay? I feel like I'm balancing my body more. I have more coordination, more rhythm between my hands and feet, okay? So one last thing, kind of going along with that shuffle, using this kind of weight shifted shuffle. You know, when I step, I'm stepping from a weight shift. I shift my weight to get my steps. My trailing foot follows naturally, right? Okay. So an exercise to gain some more rhythm from your stance with this kind of weight shift shuffle thing that I used to step with, right? So what you can do is this. You stand completely squared up, start shifting your weight from foot to foot. Pick your left hand and just start flicking some jabs out. Try to keep the pace of your weight shift the same. And flick some jabs out. And notice I'm shifting right, left, but my left arm is still going, right? I'm gaining some rhythm between my hands and feet. Do the same with your right hand. So what this is doing is this is giving you more complex rhythm between your weight shift, your steps, right? And your hands. I'm moving out of a 1-to-1 rhythm where it's 1, 1, 1, step, step, punch. And I'm getting to the point where I can throw multiple kind of jabs. They don't have to be jabs. These can be feints, right? This is how you close the distance. This is how you get out of this bad position. You got to have good jabs and feints. But what I'm doing is I'm getting to the point where I can move my hand faster than my feet. So what he sees all this hand movement, feints and jabs, hand movement, and it's harder to read what my feet are doing. Okay? If you see how my left hand is constantly moving, but look at the rhythm of my feet. Okay? So to me, that's what boxing rhythm is all about. It's the coordination between your feet and your hands, right? So what sets boxers apart is we have a lot of rhythm, really good rhythm between our hands and our feet, okay? We can throw multiple punches off of 1 or 2 weight shifts, okay? That's a whole nother video. I have other videos talking about that. But just try this exercise. Start working on this shuffle, right? Practice the shuffling kind of motion, right? And then try that exercise. Shift your weight from right foot to left foot. Try to keep your hand going. Keep your hand punching. Switch hands. Practice both hands, right? Get comfortable from a southpaw position. Okay? It's going to make you more versatile. You're going to have more options. Right, you might be moving back in a position where you can't really step that quick. He's closing in. Like, he doesn't know that these aren't really hard punches. They can be kind of hard. They get their strength from their speed and the form of the punch, okay? But it's something. It can deter him from moving in, right? Okay, so try it out. Like the video, sub the channel. Peace.